Welcome to FNN News, FNN News Network. I am your host, Cybele, and today we're going to be interviewing Tashale Abera. Tashale Abera is the former president of the Oromia Regional State Supreme Court and a senior Ethiopian judge. He was forced into exile in 2006 after experiencing harassment from the government for refusing to facilitate politically motivated trials. Mr. Abera is now a researcher working with the Oromia Support Group, as well as other human rights and humanitarian organizations, including the OGF. Mr. Abera, welcome to FNN News. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So first off, we'll start off with a question. I want to ask about the Prime Minister in Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed's arrests of his political opposition leaders. Can you talk a little bit about upon what legal basis Abiy Ahmed is arresting his political opposition and what the Ethiopian law has to say about what the Prime Minister is doing right now?
The law is very clear, both nationally and internationally. Every bit of the fiber knows that what they are doing is completely illegal, because it is not about legality now anymore. There is no law in Ethiopia. When I left Ethiopia, there was some element of law. Even after I left, sometime after I left, now it's completely different. The reason I'm saying is the reason I'm saying this is that some of the prisoners, the political prisoners, are quite freed by the court, and yet especially in Oromia, the government chose to keep them in detention. Not just the political leaders, activists, and supporters of political organizations, even judges who dare to persuade the government to release, to act according to the law, are arrested. I have many evidences that judges about the arrest of judges. This has been reported by OSCG, and we know friends who are arrested, beaten up, intimidated. That is what's going on in Ethiopia. Not only judges, the prosecutors themselves, for doing what they should do, for refusing to concoct Trump-up charge, arrested and harassed police officers who are not too extreme, who just resist the temptation of complying with illegal demands of the government, are harassed and facing the same thing. And we know many, it is very difficult to mention those who are in office, because that might enhance or create a chance of them to be targeted. So that is what is going on. As far as those illegally arrested and jailed and kept in detention and deprived of basic necessities like water, food, we have got not hundreds but thousands of them. So in Ethiopia, it is nonsense to talk about law now. It is meaningless by that. It is not nonsense to talk about law, but it is not anymore relevant in Ethiopia, because the law is not relevant to the Ethiopian government. Ethiopian government has become the most brutal government administration in Africa. Probably on the face of the earth, you don't find a government acting like Ethiopia. People are just dragged from prison and shot in public, executed, while people are forced to watch. This has never been seen. So we have got past the point where we should talk about rule of law, judicial oversight, and things like that. We are there now.
Mm-hmm. And you said that this rule of law has it's gotten worse from when you were in Ethiopia previously. So what is that erosion of the legal process due to? What caused that since you were there?
What caused that is, before we didn't know that. Before that, the TPLF, who was quite influential in the EPRDF, I don't know whether you have got a full grasp of what EPRDF is about. EPRDF used to be a coalition of 4 parties, and different parties associated with EPRDF managed to survive and thrive, actually, meaning the political parties and the leaders of those benefited from the system, but somehow were forced to behave sensibly. They were oppressing, they were dictators, and yet TPLF was able to tell them off when they misbehave too harshly. Mm-hmm. Now, when that was lifted off, the true nature of OPDO, for example, OPDO is in charge of Oromia for the past 30 years, and it's actually responsible for what has been happening in Oromia. The pretext, the reason for OPDO was we didn't have our own power. We are dictated by TPLF. The TPLF was interfering with internal affairs. That is what is happening in Oromia is because of that interference. Actually, it was not the case. Even then, we knew that was not entirely true. There was some level of interference from TPLF, but the OPDO willingly submitted. The organization, the same party that was responsible for the administration of Amara region, was responsible for what was happening in Amara region, regional state. Mm-hmm. And in the southern people, nations, and nationalities state, the story was the same. Yet, when TPLF was removed because of the Oromo movement, basically it is the Oromo movement that brought this change, these OPDOs used the Oromo rhetoric, took side. They just they appeared as if they took side with the Oromos and hijacked it. When they hijacked and came to power, we began to see the true nature of OPDO, which is so worse than what we used to experience during the EPRDF era, meaning that before 2018. Mm-hmm. We knew that OPDO was the most corrupt political organization as far as Oromia is concerned, and I am not saying that the rest, except Tigray, there was no any administration, there was no any political organization that is concerned about its own people. Mm-hmm. TPLF truly represented its people. Even then, we know that. What we did disagree with TPLF was they were not fair when it comes to the administration of the entire country, Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. They let OPDO to do whatever it was doing. Mm-hmm. And they participated in and orchestrated the removal of for the suppression of genuine Oromo political oppositions, including the OLF, the OFC. The OFC survived for some time, but the suppression and the experience of OFC members was quite horrible. The student movement, the right to speak, the right to research, the right to speak as a journalist, the right to assembly, everything was met with brutal force in Ethiopia. And I know the students, especially the student movement, I've been witnessing for so long while I was a judge at the High Court and finally as a president of High Court and the Supreme Court. And I witnessed all the way that the Ethiopian government was so brutal. The brutality, the systematic way of suppression it is quite troubling. And whenever the student protested, the way they were trying to suppress those movements, it is quite troubling. It is quite targeted. It is quite racist, actually. It is racist because it often targets students who are top students. Whenever there is a protest, every time there is a protest, the first target are the first top 10 students from every class. They just run around classrooms, and they target those students who are 1 to 10 top students from each class. What is the purpose of this? Unless they are trying to kill something, to kill a generation. It looks like it has not any political purpose. It is not even to suppress a protest. We have been witnessing that, and it quite amazed me for some time. And that was the trend for many years in Oromia. Who is doing that? It is Opidio who is doing that. It is not TPLF even who was orchestrating. Who was responsible was Oromia police and the security apparatus working in Oromia. Who is in charge of that? People like Abadullah. The Oromia presidents from time to time were responsible for that. The police commissioners were responsible for that. So the kind of suppression and the way people were treated is like Nazism, like fascism, like the South African apartheid, where brilliant people who would think would be targeted and eliminated. It's about just cutting off a generation that thinks, that demands something, that asks about rights. That is what was going on in Ethiopia for so long. Now, it is quite horrible. And, we have never seen this kind of suppression. There was a killing, there is no question about it. All the way since 1991, the killing was there. Assassinations were there. People were forced to disappear or made to disappear. We witnessed that, and many people, many mothers, many fathers cried for so long. But now, it is unimaginable. And I know many prisoners, and I am receiving many reports now through my contacts, and especially through the contacts we have through OSG and Oromo Human Rights Group in Germany. We have got a network of human rights organizations working together, and we brief each other every day. And the news we hear is quite troubling. It is horrible. Look what is happening in Tigray now. The brutality of the government in Tigray doesn't manifest anything about Oromos, and the guy who is in charge, in power, claims to be an Oromo. It has nothing to do with Oromo. It doesn't represent the interest of the Oromo people, and we are in a very terrible place now, and it is quite troubling. It is even difficult to speak, to hear. It is horrifying.
And FNN News, of course, has been reporting upon the jailing of some of those political opposition leaders, which we believe their lives to be potentially in danger. Some names that we've discussed on the show before include leaders and figures such as Dawood Ibsa, Gamachu Ayana, Abdi Regasa, Bate Orgesa, Lami Benya, Dawit Abdata, Michael Boran, and Aman File. All these lives of people who have been jailed. So I wanted to ask, on sort of the legal side, on what legal basis are they being kept in prison? What is the status of that? And also, is there a potential hope that a legal case could be launched to try to improve their situation at all?
No, there is no legal base to arrest these guys, because as far as the court is concerned, they are released. They are set free. They are tried, and the court said that they should be released. But the government decided, that the security apparatus led by Abiy said, we want to do that. And the judges tried, and the lawyers tried to persuade the court to do something else, but the judges could function when the executive government is respectful of the law. There in the USA or in China, judges simply decide. All they have is they use their pen and write down the decision, or their voice in the bench, and people respect that. If that doesn't exist, there is no court. So that is why I'm saying that we got past the stage where we should talk about judges, courts, because they don't exist in fact. That is one. You mentioned these guys. These guys were released by court. They are free as far as the law is concerned. But nobody is free in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a big prison. Even outside, if you are outside the prison, you are still in prison. You can't speak. You can't speak your mind. Not only you can't keep silent, you are forced to be silent. You must actively support the government. If you are not actively supporting the government, then you are an enemy. So the situation in Ethiopia is horrifying. It is quite terrible, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So rule of law, courts, and so on and so forth, we talk if judges can affect anything when it comes to the conduct of the executive government. They can't. The police decides. They are the judges, the juries, and everything. And the judges who dare to persuade the police or the prosecutor or the government agenda in any way to arrest, to harass people, then they are themselves at risk. I'm telling you that there are judges, currently I can give you their name, list of their name, who are in prison and for whom we are fighting, for whom lawyers are fighting. But for no avail, there is no law. You cannot access law in Ethiopia. That is what it is. And that is quite, people can't believe what I'm saying. But that's the truth. The name you mentioned are the reality of what I'm talking about. That is, they are an evidence of it. That is why Jawar and Bekele and his co-defendants said, we don't anymore go to court to for trial. Because if we are going to get a decision, we are not going to be released anyway. If we are released, we will be killed. Because the government is executing people. Day in and out. That is what happened to many OLF supporters. Dawood Ibsa, the chairman of OLF, and Marra Guddina, who is the chairman of OFC, they are not free. They can't speak. They can't say a word. Have you heard anything saying themselves? Actually, Dawood is in prison. He can't move around unless permission. He is in house arrest. We know that. And it is not that they are violent. It is because they speak through power. And the power in Ethiopia, you can't speak to. You just listen and actively support. Listening and remaining silent is not enough as far as Ethiopian concerned. You have to actively support. If you fail to actively support, then you are a criminal. Then you are a suspect. You can be executed. That's what's happening in Ethiopia. So we got past the stage where we talk about judicial primacy, judicial supremacy, rule of law, and so on and so forth. Independent judiciary. You cannot be independent in Ethiopia. There was that level of freedom. There was a sign of freedom in Ethiopia. When I was there. When I say that there was a freedom, I am not saying that there was no harassment. There has always harassment. Even then, when I was there, judges were continuously harassed, even beaten, even arrested.
Yeah.
I know my own judges arrested, and I fought them, and I got them out of prison. And humiliated. You cannot redress that. You cannot address that once you are humiliated. It stays with you. The stains of it remains in your mind, and it's about your reputation. That is what it is. But there was that sort of thing. Now it's quite different. We hope that it could improve. If we work hard, it could improve. That was one. And if we work through this, we can get some people released. We were able to get released, to affect our judgment, to give effect to our judgments while I was there. If it is refused, there was some mechanism, some system by which we would be able to follow them. Now, there was no that kind of thing. And the Federal Supreme Court, especially those people who are tried by the Federal Supreme Court, by the Federal Court, outside of Oromia, the court itself is more hostile than anything. That is why Jawar Muhammad, the famous activist and one of the peaceful, the promoter of democracy, and who believed that democracy is possible in Ethiopia, was a victim of it himself. Bakala Garba is the most peaceful, he is like a priest. He is like a priest to be violent. It is very difficult to radicalize a priest. There are radical priests nowadays, especially the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the engines behind violence in Ethiopia for centuries, and its truth is coming out now. We know that, but he is a kind of Protestant background, very calm and highly spiritual guy. When he joined politics, that face of him was very visible, and it is Bakala who is accused of violence now. It just doesn't hold. You just can't accuse Jawar for that, because Jawar brought these people, brought these men to power. Actually, he is accused of doing what he did by most of us. It was a mistake to promote these guys, because they were responsible for the crimes committed for the past 27 years when they came to power. Now, the crimes they committed over the past 3 years is unprecedented. We haven't seen that over the past. The crimes that was committed, the killings that has been committed over the past 3 years, it exceeds what happened in total. If you compare what happened over the past 27 years, what happened in the past 3 years, it's just horrible. It is just terrifying. It's really very sad.
So I'm wondering if you could describe to our audience what caused you to leave the country and go into exile, and what kinds of similarities you see between the harassment that you experienced then and what is going on now in the country, if you see that as kind of a starting point for this other troubling suppression that has grown in the past 15 years since you left.
Well, when I left, there was hope. There was hope. It would, at least the current arrangement, the democratic arrangement set out in 1991 and concretely laid in 1995 would survive, would flourish, and eventually it would be possible to democratize the country. And if people are displeased, not happy, there is a possibility to negotiate the system itself, because the constitution says so. More power could be devolved, and that process is there. But unfortunately, I couldn't go on living there, because after a while I began to see that I am a target. Managed to change effect. I believe that I managed to change effect, and it began to work. Especially the then vice president, more than the president. Badula was president, and the vice president was in collaboration with the people in the prosecution, and in conjunction with some guys at the Federal Supreme Court, began to concoct something. It is too vast. And I began to feel that, and especially when I tried to establish a training institute, a research and training institute. That was a very big institute. We developed a curriculum where judges, trainees could be trained as to become a judge and a prosecutor. And that was developed on the basis of the experience of French legal system. So based on those, we developed a very good system. And once we began to recruit trainees, the vice president came out and said that we have to recruit from OPDOs. If we want to recruit judges, they must be politically loyal to the regime. And this is going to be the first entry. That is my signature, if you want to say. And I can't do that. I couldn't do that. And finally, I contemplated resigning at that point, because that was so aggressive. And especially when we agreed to work with the prosecutors, because training prosecutors was one of the things that I had in mind. It is the legal professionals training and research, law research institute. It's a very big institute. So they said that they began to negotiate with the Federal Supreme Court and some other forces of the federal government. And there was a movement that they have to make sure that the OPDO cadres join the court. I couldn't do that. So as far as the Judicial Commission is not in charge of recruiting the would-be judges who are after training would be nominated by the Supreme Court, by the Judicial Commission after graduation. A judge is appointed by the parliament, but we created this process, and when we created and began to implement, we're going to implement it, and this guy came and interfered, and I couldn't manage to avoid it. That was kind of the last straw that breaks the back of the camel. That's what they say, I think. So then I said, this is a no-go area, and I cannot make it happen. So I contemplated resignation, and when I said that I should resign, my friends appointed me from the political. Some politicians also approached me that told me that no, you cannot resign. If you approach, you are already very famous, and the people know you, and especially the change that took place in the court is visible, and your name is often mentioned. If you resign, you will become topic of discussion, and eventually, when you resign, you will be a target. So you keep silent and stay, or you have to do something about it. But resignation is not something we should do lightly. So finally, I was coming to. I had a fight. I did a direct fight in August 2006 as well, regarding the separation of power between the Federal Supreme Court and the Regional Supreme Court. It was in public at Ethiopian Hilton Hotel. There was a national meeting regarding how judges should be treated, the federal judges and the regional judges. And there was kind of spat between me and the then Federal Supreme Court President. And that was another reason. Especially the regional judges, the regional politicians began to exploit that to antagonize me with the system. And finally, I realized that this is the end of it. I could have survived because I didn't have a direct problem with Abadullah, the then president. There was no very close danger, but the danger is that I couldn't do what they were planning to do, especially with the judges. If I resisted them and did what I planned to do, I have to bulldoze many things. And it was quite risky to me. Finally, I left. Regarding what is different from then and now, what I told you, it's quite different.
Yes.
It's quite different. Now the court doesn't exist. It doesn't totally exist. The structure is there, but the institution is not working. It's not because the court is not willing to work, especially the Oromia court is somehow willing to work. There are elements of judges. There are some people who are really committed to make it work, to justice, for justice to be served. But they can't. They just can't. And the loyalists are doing the mess of it. There are always loyalists who take side with powers. Because perhaps they are out of fear. Perhaps just to take advantage, just to remain in power and comfortable. Some people are comfortable with power. You can't avoid it. There are opportunities everywhere in the world. You can't avoid that. But it is impossible anyway, whether you like it or not. You have to do whatever they want. If you do whatever you want, meaning you apply law, it never happens in Oromia. So when I was there, the law applies somehow. There are serious challenges, but anyhow, you can make change. You can make decisions that can affect something. Now you can't.
A profile that was done of you by the Addis Standard back in 2017, I believe, mentioned that you had been asked to facilitate the trials of around 18,000 detainees who were transported to some detention facilities in the Oromia regional state after having been detained in the capital of Finfine, and that those detainees were experiencing torture and other inhumane conditions. I'm wondering, is that also a practice that's still going on, to your knowledge, that they're bringing people into the capital and experiencing that?
And now it is different. It is far different from that. It was 2005 election. After the 2005 election, the government captured about 18,000 people and transported them into Western Oromia, a place called Esa is a military camp. And finally, we were asked to try those cases. That case belongs to the federal court, because Addis Ababa, everything that happened in Addis Ababa is, in principle, belongs to the federal court. So when they caught them and transported them to Esa, a federal institution by itself, because it is a military camp. When we were asked by the president of Supreme Court, these people are Amaras, we are Oromos. It is your turn to punish them. They are our common enemies. That was what I was told. I was really shocked. And I was shocked and I was really upset and angry because it is like insult as far as I'm concerned. And so I said, no, we want to do that because we don't have jurisdiction to try this case. If these people were caught from Addis Ababa, capital city of FNN, then it is a federal Supreme Court and it is branches who should deal with it. Like Supreme Court and High Court, and first there are three tiers, by branches, I mean that. So when I say that we are in crisis, it doesn't matter. Because we're going to many different places in Oromia and doing this business for so long. Now you do it yourself. We don't. When finally this was taken to I was told that it was taken to the then Prime Minister, Mallas, and something was being concocted for me. And I was informed by some security guy, and he came to my office and told me that you said this and that to the Supreme Court President. Yes, I did. How do you know that? I know that I heard from Mallas this is now being discussed, and you are going to be a victim of it. Wow. So what do you advise? Do whatever you like, but don't say that you won't let the judges do it. And I was really amazed, and finally I came back to Supreme Court and gathered friends, judges, senior judges, and talked to them. And some High Court presidents were there by chance, and I discussed this matter. And when I talked to them, they told me something. First place, you shouldn't respond like that. Why is that? Because when they asked you about it, you don't say that you are responsible for that. They should bring to the court, and the court must decide whether they have a jurisdiction in the first place. Well, I was trying to protect my judges. In the first place, shouldn't. It's very obvious. No, even then, if they are that much determined, why do you take the risk? The judges are there to decide. We know how to decide. If we don't have jurisdiction, we say at the bench that we don't have that jurisdiction. That's one. The other thing is, we see the case. It's a technical matter. The jurisdiction, you are talking about technical matters than substance. We have got a jurisdiction on the substance of it. So we have to decide that matter. And it was the president of the that High Court, that place is situated was there, and just keep quiet and let them come. And finally, it was brought to the court, and the judges looked at it and released about 17,500 people within a month. What they expected was the judges would be harsh because these people are CUD members, rather Amaras and Oromos, and what they were contemplating was almost retaliate using their judicial power. We want to do that. Justice is justice. I know that many Oromos might not agree to that. Perhaps if it were the Amara courts who were trying the Oromo case, they might behave differently. But we have to do the right thing. These people are protesters. Probably they don't know what they are doing. Probably they didn't even participate in whatever they are alleged to be incriminated with. Finally, they were released, and it was more of a bail issue than even the substance of it. And when they realized that, I was challenged by the Supreme Court. And one of the ministers, Tafara Warua, they came to the Abadullah, the then president, and accused him of supporting the opposition. Abadullah was very clear that if I am going to support someone, it is not the CUD affiliated ones. He meant if I am going to support, if Tashale is going to be suspected of supporting. It is not the COD supporters in the capital city. They are different, and we have got our reason for suspecting. People are accusing him of supporting or taking side easy on OLF supporters. So doesn't work, doesn't fit in his profile. So he dismissed it, and it ended up there. But this kind of thing where the things that were going on in Oromia, every time I produced, I came to the parliament to make a report. Probably one day we see that video. Everybody of Ricardo was complaining that OLF supporters are released, and judicial staff or judges all over Oromia are OLF supporters. They are OLF in the first place. That is how we were accused and blamed. And yet, we survived. Mm-hmm. Now, no, you can't. If you breathe, if you do something was they don't want, you will be arrested. And this order comes from the Prime Minister, because the names you mentioned and many thousands of people who are in Oromia in jails and secret prisons in Oromia are arrested and imprisoned and detained, and the suffering they are going through because of things. They are tortured in Oromia. Mm-hmm. I was talking with some people who are in Galam prison and Puludim to prison. If I tell you the story of what happened to these people, it is quite frightening. Mm. People are raped. Girls are raped. Mm. We have evidence that not only raped, impregnated while in prison, and gave birth in prison by police officers. We have evidence of that. This never happened for many years. In 1991, 1992, there was that kind of thing. 93, 94, that kind of thing existed, but gradually it was becoming somehow normal. I'm not saying that there was no torture. There was massive torture. But now it is unprecedented. Girls are raped, and there are girls who are bleeding and who we are trying to help from outside secretly. You can't help. The people you mentioned are not only held, detained, they are not fed. And people who are providing food, especially around Burayu, were caught themselves and arrested. Their crime, they supplied food. The government used to supply food before. They have got 20 Ethiopian birr per day. 20 Ethiopian birr is like below 50p. 50 cents US dollar. 50 cents. It is not enough for anything. It doesn't buy an egg and the bread per day, leave alone water and so on and so forth. It doesn't exist now. The government scrapped that. And the reason, you are not legally detained. If you are not legally detained, that is more of a reason to be treated well. And you are left alone, and people who are trying to provide food from outside, they are arrested. So in Ethiopia, you are not only arrested and detained, but starved, beaten. Beaten to death. There are people who are beaten to death. In one of the prisons, his brother was killed in a beating just near FNN. And during the beating, they asked him whether the guy, because they knew that they are associated, is he his brother? Your brother? No, he denied. Because they were about to kill him. if they knew that he was a brother associated. He survived, and he is in one of the prisons. I don't want to be specific on that because of his safety. But this is the truth of it. That is what is happening beyond our eyes, in front of our eyes now. So the question is, Ethiopia is becoming a hell for Oromos. And most of the crimes that has been committed in Tigray and in Oromia, West Wallagga, Borana recently, they picked two kids, and it was on YouTube. Many of you might have seen that. It is even very terrifying and scary to see it. You can't show people the extent of the crime. It is that much now.
I wanted to ask you about your opinion on the recent election this past summer, of course, which essentially cemented the power of the ruling Prosperity Party. But of course, when we look at what went on with that election, less than half of the country actually ended up voting. And there were reported election irregularities. So what's your opinion on that? Do you think that was a legitimate election? What do you think happened with that?
No, it's not legitimate. It's very clear. There was no election. You cannot arrest, keep in detention, dismantle the office of the opposition altogether and conduct election and say that there is election. There is no election. I know that. As the world knows that there is no election, and we shouldn't even argue about that. There is no election. Prime Minister Abiy believed deep in his heart that he would be a king because he had this delusion that his mother told him that he would become a king. That prophecy. He is a perfect version of Al Qaeda. These radicals like Bin Laden. They believe something. Al Qaeda might not explain him. I don't know what the word means. Sometimes what the word means and how it is defined could be different. But when it comes to this guy, he is so radical, violently radical guy. He is so attacked. He believes that he is a messiah, a God sent. His mother told him that he would become a king one day. This is on video. We've seen that, and he believes that. He honestly believes that. Because of that, it has to happen, and that thinking has been enhanced by false prophets, radical Orthodox priestess, who believe that every race that opposes, that stands against this guy, this king, should perish, should be met with the harshest of measures. So that is the expression of it. There is no election at all. And there is no election at all. And I knew that there wouldn't be election from the start. I was personally invited to take part in the election process. There was some nomination going on, and I was personally invited to take part in the election board as one of the officials. And I had to refuse. It is now 2-something years ago. And when I received that invitation, and I was laughed, and it was very clear then, not today, that election was not going to take place. It was very clear when they refused to let OLF go into the process, meaning go home. And there was Abiy and Lemma were sabotaging OLF's coming home. And OFC that was there for so long was pushed around then. And if they were really ready for the change, the best way out was to embrace the opposition, because everybody was for that democracy, the democracy they claim to have at that moment. So that is what it is. This guy is a CUD, a Coalition for Unity and Democracy party that was established in 2005. That Coalition for Unity and Democracy is not a unity. It is a denial of your identity. Unless you deny your identity and pretend that you are an Amharic speaking, and a Christian, from a Christian you must be an Orthodox, to be an Ethiopian. That is what it is. That is what this man is trying to install, and it's not going to happen. And the election is simply does no any element of election. There was no election in the first place. There was no election in Tigray. There is no election in many parts of Oromia. It is what is. When the true election took place in Tigray, it was met by force. That was election. Tigray said elections should take place based on the time frame set out in the constitution. They were right on that. They were absolutely right on that. The Ethiopian government refused that. It was messing up election, pushing the oppositions around, the closure of office of OLF, and the OFC was hot in Oromia. So the election was not something that the Abiy government was going for from the start. And he was encouraged by his prophets. And he was busy bringing back the resuscitate the spirit of the dead kings like Menelik, like Haile Selassie, like Theodros. And he was trying to find a pride from where it didn't exist. The pride he was talking about was a shame for the Oromo people. It was a sign of suppression. It was a history of subjugation. That is what it is for the Oromos. And not only for the Oromos, for the rest of people, nations, and nationalities that was arrested, imprisoned, and now people are considering Ethiopia as a jail. And that is the true expression of Ethiopia now. People were ready to make compromises and to make it work. Now, Abiy proved that it won't. So there we are now. So election is not what Abiy wanted. He actually was committed to stay in power without election, but just wanted to give it an impression of election, but there was no election. He didn't mean it, and it didn't happen.
Lastly, you mentioned that there was sort of this moment of hope back in 1991 during the regime change then. So I'm wondering if you think there's any kind of possibility that a regime change is possible now with so many groups in the country that are so opposed to how Abiy Ahmed is governing. Do you think that's at all possible?
Everything is possible now. But the regime change that is like the former EPRDF or that replaces this one won't be the likely outcome from what we see today, because everything is polarized, and the future of Ethiopia is in the hands of the oppressed people now. Ethiopia is rejected by every oppressed nations and nationalities now. Nobody cares about Ethiopia. All they care is for their survival. The states that are already forming Ethiopia, the constituting states, are trying to figure out what should be the future of Ethiopia. So we don't know what is going to happen, but something big is going to happen now. Could it be a complete, total disintegration of Ethiopia? That is possible. Could Ethiopia survive in some form? That is possible too. But if Ethiopia survives, it is going to be a different Ethiopia. Let me give you a very clear example. For example, Tigray has got its own defense already. The constitution changed. It changes the constitution. It completely changes the current arrangement. Tigray won't be asked to dismantle its military force if they succeed bringing down this government, which is likely now going to happen. Oromia is building its own defense. The Wabo, or the Ola, or the Oromo Liberation Army, is getting stronger and stronger day by day. And it is going to be the defense of Oromia. And it is not going to, they are not going to disappear after that. So that changes, for example, the political, the framework of Ethiopia, the politics of Ethiopia altogether. It is a completely different arrangement. Now we have got a federal Ethiopia, but we reached the point where Ethiopia is a confederacy sort of thing now. It is completely different. Let me tell you about language. People were ready to give some kind of concession for Amharic. I don't think the Oromos are ready now to bend for that, to give that concession, because the Amaras came out with this aggressive energy that the Oromos shouldn't exist as people. The Amharic, the Oromo language shouldn't exist as people. And the Oromo people are not prepared for that. So the Oromo people are pushed too much. The Tigrans are pushed too much, so that the concession they were ready to give, or they gave in 1991, is off the table now. It appears that way from what we see. It is already happening. The defense issue is one. The language issue is another. This defines who you are. It is not going to be the same again. If you are going to try to figure out whether, when I tried to figure out whether Ethiopia could be the same, I just couldn't see that. Because living together requires understanding. Somebody was talking, I think Dr. Henok Gabisa was talking about it a couple of days ago. He was talking about who is opposing Abiy. About 60-70% of the Ethiopian, the people, nations and nationalities living in that empire are against his offer. His offer is Ethiopia that speak one language, Amharic, that believes in one religion, Orthodox. And that is it. That is not going to happen. So if this regime goes away, the regime that is going to happen is not a regime. It is going to be a government, but a completely different government, a democratic one. And we have got a bumpy road ahead of us. How is it going to play out? We don't know, but something is going to happen. It is meant to happen, and who made it like that? It is just Abiy. Abiy messed up everything. He is a child who believes in something naively, and he won't change anymore. And his belief that he is a king is enhanced every day, and he is really a very devoted Christian who believes that his God told him to be a king. So how can you change a fanatic?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is what I feel, and that is the reality of it. I think many people would agree to that, except the CUD supporters and the Orthodox fanatics like Kibret, or a priest who was preaching that the people who are against him should be exterminated from the face of the earth. That is what they are propagating.
Well, Tashale Abera, I think that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for talking to us here at FNN News. It's been a very interesting conversation. And thanks again to our listeners and viewers for tuning in. Again, this is FNN News, FNN News Network, and I am your host, Cybele.